Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezrat Hashem, today in Masechet Sanhedrin, we're going to learn the second half of Chaf Bet Amud Bet, from the middle of the page to the bottom, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to finish the second parak. We're going to have really one topic of discussion today, which is a continuum from the discussion of yesterday regarding Kohanim cutting their hair every 30 days, which will lead us to a discussion about the requirement of Kohanim to keep their hair cut today, as well as not drink wine today. That will really carry us through the end of the parak with one side point about this unique haircut the Kohen Gadol used to get at the end of the parak. So we'll begin about halfway down the page, Chaf Bet Amud Bet, which is Ihachi Ha'idna Nami. Zat Hashem, our learning should be a zechut, a merit for a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery for Yaakov ben Dinah. And again, we begin Ihachi Ha'idna Nami. So let's just remember, we had left off yesterday. We brought a proof that it says in the pasuk in Yechezkel, "Pera lo yishalechu," the Kohanim shall not send forth a pera, and we deduced from Nazir that pera means 30 days. So from this we learned that a Kohen has to cut his hair every 30 days. So the Gemara asks, "Ihachi, if this is true, ha'idna nami." Today also the Kohanim should have to cut their hair every 30 days. Seems to be, it's a rule that they have to cut their hair every 30 days. So maybe they have to also today. So the Gemara answers, Dum yadi yayin. It's the same thing about imbibing wine. Ma yayin bizman bia huda asur. Just as regarding wine, it's only when they're going to do the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash that it's asur. It's actually this week's parasha. According to one shita, the Avirav, the sons of Aaron, of Nadav Avihu, was that they went in shetuya yayin. So just as regarding wine, the isur is only when they're going to do avodah, Shalo bezman bia shari, but not if they're not doing the avodah, they're allowed to drink wine. Af perore rosh, also having their hair unshorn means longer than 30 days. Bizman bia asur, shalo bizman bia shari. So it's only when they're doing avodah, but if they're not doing avodah, and since today they're not doing avodah at all, therefore there's no prohibition or requirement for them to cut their hair every 30 days. Says the Gemara, "V'yayin shelo bizman bia de shari." Shari, is it true, the way you're saying it, you're assuming that Kohanim are allowed to drink wine today because it's not a time of avodah, there's no avodah today. The problem with that is, we're going to prove from a Braita that it seems to be the position of the Chachamim that today there would actually be a real prohibition against the Chachamim to drink wine. So we quote the second half of the Braita, which is Rebbe's opinion. But Rashi tells us, the beginning part of the Braita states as follows. We know that the Kohanim were broken up into 24 mishmarot. Each of those mishmarot was compiled of families that would serve, the whole group would serve every week. They would switch this off. Each of the mishmarot was compiled of batei avot, and each of the batei avot would serve one day of that week. So based on this, the Tanakama, the Chachamim of that Braita say as follows. If somebody recognizes which mishmar he came from, and he also knows which Beit Av he came from, which means he knows which day in the year, theoretically, if there would be a Beit HaMikdash today, he would have to serve. So such a person, he's prohibited on drinking wine that day of the year, but the rest of the year he could drink wine. Now, based on this, if somebody does not recognize, only recognizes his mishmar, but he doesn't recognize his Beit Av, so he knows which week he served, but he wouldn't know which day he served, so he's prohibited in drinking wine just that week. However, the Tanakama, Chachamim say, if he does not recognize his mishmar or his Beit Av, so maybe every day of the year could be theoretically the time he's supposed to serve. And therefore, he wouldn't be allowed to drink wine the entire year according to the Chachamim, because maybe the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt today, and that's his time to serve, so he wouldn't be allowed to drink wine. That's the position of the Chachamim. Comes Rebbe in the Braita, V'atanya, but the Braita says, Rebbe responds and says like this, Omer ani, I would say, if you're so concerned that where he doesn't know his Beit Av, his Mishmar, that he can't drink wine the entire year because maybe that's today, Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt and he'll have to serve. So I say, Kohanim, Asurin Lishtot Yayin La'olam. Based on what you're saying, the way Rashi explains, even if he does know his Mishmar, everyone should be prohibited, all Kohanim should be prohibited, because maybe when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, there's going to be a change up in terms of whoever's available to serve will serve, and therefore even if it's not his mishmar as Beit Av, maybe it'll be his time to serve. So based on your logic, all Kohanim should not be allowed to drink wine ever. Aval ma'aseh, but Rebbe concludes, what should I do? Shetakanato kilkalato. The solution is because of the detriment. As Rashi explains, because based on this concern, Kohanim would be prohibited in drinking wine forever. So they made a takana. We're not worried about that. We're not worried it's going to be shemi banat pitom. We're not worried it's going to be rebuilt suddenly, even though we wait for it every day. And therefore they could drink wine, says Rebbe today. But what's the point? For Amar Abaye, Abaye concluded, Kiman shati kahani chamra ha'idna, in accordance with whom are the Kohanim allowed to drink wine today? Kerebi, it's only like the position of Rebbe. Mechlal, this would imply the Rabbanan Asri, that actually the Rabbanan hold Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine today. So you see what? That today it's not Zman of service, it's not Zman Avodah, and Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine. So how can you tell me, just as they're allowed to let the hair grow long because it's not the time of service, they're also, just as they're allowed to drink wine because it's not the time of service, they're also allowed to hair grow long. You see today, according to the Chacham, they're not allowed to drink wine. The Gemara answers, this is going to be the first answer. The reason that we're concerned about wine, the Chachamim say they can't drink wine today, there's such a gezerah, because Mehirai bana Beit HaMikdash, speedily the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt. Uba'inan kohen haro'eh la'avodah, and they're going to need a kohen that's fitting for service. Vileka, and if the kohen has drunk wine, it won't be fit for service. That's why there's such a gezerah. Asks the Gemara, okay, but hachanami, ba'ina kohen haro'eh la'avodah vileka, that you should have the same concern regarding the long hair. If you let the Kohen grow his hair out long, so maybe the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and then he won't be fit for service. So the Gemara answers, there's a difference. Hacha efsher de mesaper va'ayil. Haircut's an easy thing to do. So even if he has long hair, he can get a haircut in 3 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, whatever it is, and then he'll go do the avodah. Asks the Gemara, okay, but hatam nami efsher denayim porta va'ayil. We know that a solution to drunkenness is you sleep a little bit. That solves, it takes away the drunkenness. Ravacha derech mil. Ravacha says, walking a mil, the shina kolsho, and a little bit of sleep, mefigin et hayayin, it removes the wine from a person. So the Gemara says, l'chaura, that would have a solution too, so why can't they drink wine today either? So the Gemara answers, velav itmar Allah, but no, we know it was stated about that. Amar Nachman Amar Abba bar Avua, lo shanu ela shashata kedei revi'it. A little bit of sleep could help only if you only drank a revi'it, a small amount of wine. But more than that, it's even more so that if he walks a little bit or he sleeps a little bit, it even makes him more confused. And therefore, the first explanation in terms of this distinction is, whereas regarding wine, the Chachamim make a gezerah, that's because that would make them theoretically unfit for service if the Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt today, and you can't just fix it in a short snap. Haircut he can get, and therefore there's no problem. He can let his hair grow long. Today, we're not worried. Answer number 2. Ravashi says a second distinction. Regarding those who drink wine, if they do service like this, it desecrates the service. Rashi quotes the pasuk. Based on a pasuk, it desecrates the service if a kohen does the avodah when he is intoxicated. This week's parasha, like I said. But Peruei Rosh, so therefore they made a gzerah there. They said even today they're not allowed to drink wine. But Peruei Rosh, delo machali avodah, regarding one with long hair, if he does service when his hair is longer than 30 days, it doesn't desecrate the service. It's asur, but it doesn't desecrate the service. So lo gazru b'Rabbanan, the rabbis therefore didn't make a gzerah, and the kohen could have his hair long today. Asks the Gemara on Ravashi, Meitevei. The problem is we have a Braita kasha against Ravashi because the Braita says Ve'elu sheba mita. It says these types of Kohanim would be chayav mita if they do the avodah peruei rosh when their hair is long, or v'shetuya yayin if they've drunk wine when they did the avodah. So bishlam v'shetuya yayin dichtiv. I understand that if you do the avodah when you're drunk, intoxicated, you're chayav mita because it says yayin v'shechar al tesht. It says wine and intoxicating beverages you shouldn't drink, you or your sons, and you shouldn't die. So that's clear. Ela peruei rosh minal. How do we know that if he does the avodah when he is his hair is unshorn, that he's chayav mita? Because there's a hekish. Shetuya yayin peruei rosh. There's a hekish comparison between intoxication for the kohen and long hair. Because Ketiv, the pasuk tells us, v'rosham lo yigalechu. This is the pasuk in Yecheskel. Their hair should not be long. Upera lo yishalechu. And they should not send forth a long hair. Rosham lo yigalechu. They shouldn't cut their hair. Upera lo yishalechu, and they shouldn't let it grow too long. And then it says after v'yayin lo yishtu v'gomer. It says they should not drink wine. So basically, based on that, we say the following. Just as if he does the service when he's drunk, if he's intoxicated, so too, having the long hair during service would also be chayav mita. So the Gemara now turns back to Rav Ashi and says, wait a second. Once we create a hekish, based on the pasuk in Yecheskel, between unshorn hair and drinking wine that you're chayav mita, so that hekish should be made as a full hekish. Umina, so we should say the following. Just as if he does the avodah when he's drunk, it desecrates the service. So it also should refute your point, Rav Ashi, that also when he does the service with his hair long, beyond 30 days, it should also desecrate the service. And the Gemara says, Kashya, this is indeed difficult. Now some take this out based on the next step of the Gemara. It's very interesting. It seems to be Rav Ashi actually addresses this and answers this. But at this point, it seems to be Rav Ashi's answer is refuted to some degree. Because Rav Ashi's whole distinction why they're allowed to have long hair, but they're not allowed to drink wine today, is because long hair would not desecrate the avodah, whereas intoxication would. Once you make a hekish in Yecheskel for mita, should be a hekish also for desecrating the avodah, and this seems to refute his answer. So the Gemara continues now, seemingly unrelated, but we'll tie it back in a minute. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ashi. Ravina turned to Rav Ashi and he said, "Hi, adelo ate Yecheskel man amra." So he says, "Bichlal, he doesn't understand this. What you're saying is that before Yecheskel showed up, meaning you're saying is through this hekish that you're trying to make, this comparison, so you'll say through the hekish that if he has long hair, it should desecrate the avodah. Well, who said this before Yecheskel showed up? Meaning, you're saying there's such a hekish that would teach us Peroi Rosh is chayav mita. That's actually what the Braita that we quoted before. That if he does the avodah with long hair, he's chayav mita. Now, we don't find this in the Torah. And Yecheskel's a Navi. A Navi can't teach a new halacha. So who would have said this before? The Gemara turns back to that, and Rav Ashi says back, but the way you're asking, Hada Amar Rav Chizda, this that Rav Chizda said, Davar Zemi Torat Moshe Rabbeinu lo lamanu. We didn't learn this idea from Moshe's Torah, meaning from the Chamshei Torah. Ad Sheba Yecheskel v'limadnu. Until Yecheskel came and taught us the following. What was it? Kol ben nechar aral lev. Any foreign person who has aral lev, Rashi seems to say about Kohanim, if he's doing certain averot in his heart, v'aral basar, or if he's aral basar, means he wasn't circumcised, lo yavo el mikdashi l'sharteni. He's not allowed to come and do service in the Beit HaMikdash. Which Rashi learns is a Kohen whose brothers passed away, and therefore he couldn't receive Brit Milah, he can't do the avodah. So this is a pasuk in Yecheskel as well. So ad delo ba Yecheskel man amra. Well, it doesn't say that in the Torah. So who taught this before Yecheskel came along? Because we have a Yesod, Ein Navi Rashai L'chadesh Davar Me'ata. A Navi is not allowed to teach a new Chidush that's not referenced in the Torah. So therefore, where would we know this Chidush, that a Kohen is disqualified from service because of being Arel, being uncircumcised? So Elis Rav Ashi says it must be Gemara Gemirila. Really, this is what we call Halakha Moshe Sinai. It was an oral tradition Moshe got on Sinai and passed down to future generations, but it was not written down. So Yecheskel incorporated it in the Navi, but it's not something that he was mechadesh. Rather, it was already based on oral tradition back to Moshe Rabbeinu that an uncircumcised Kohen is disqualified for service. Similarly, Gemara Gemirila v'Yecheskel v'asmacha akra. Says Rav Ashi, so you could say the same idea here, that this idea of comparing yayin and peroi rosh and unshorn hair, that it's b'mita, that he'll be chayav mita if he does the service when he has his hair unshorn. That also was really based on tradition. And then Yecheskel incorporated it in the pasuk. And now we were going to read with the parentheses because really Rav Ashi is then answering the original question. So really it's not based on a real hekish in the pasuk like we had before this idea. Rather it's based on halacha Moshe Sinai. And the halacha Moshe Sinai is only for mita. So the comparison that we make between perui rosh and yayin is only to teach us that when his hair is unshorn, he's chayav mita if he does such service. But la'achulei avodah lo gemiri. But regarding desecrating the avodah, we don't necessarily have a source for that. And therefore Rav Ashi says it could be as I originally said is true. which is that Perui Rosh, the distinction is he's not going to desecrate the avodah. There's a hekish, but the hekish isn't really the source. It's really based on a previous halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and all the halacha l'Moshe Misinai taught us was that they'll both be chayav mita, but it does not teach us this idea of desecrating the avodah. And that's why the rabbis made a distinction that today the kohen's allowed to let his hair grow long because he doesn't desecrate the avodah if he'd serve that way. Okay, now if we finish off the perek with a side point, really. We had said in that pasuk above that when it says by the Kohanim, it says that they're not allowed to let their hair grow long, and it says kisom yichasmu et roshehem. So my kisom yichasmu et roshehem. They should trim their hair. What does that mean? So Tana the Braita says kimin tisporet lulyanit. This is referring to the haircut of lulyanit. Now my tisporet lulyanit. What does that mean? So Rav Yehuda Omer Shmuel tisporet yechida. It's a unique, special type of haircut. What is this referring to? It's where they cut the hair in such a way that the end of one hair touches the root of the next hair. So it's very short, where the end of one hair touches the other in a perfect manner, but it's not longer than that and not shorter than that. It was a very unique thing that was done. We'll see in a moment. This was how the Kohen Gadol had his hair shorn. Shalu at Rebbe, they asked Rebbe, Ezu tisporet shel Kohen Gadol. What was the haircut of the Kohen Gadol? Mar lahen, he said to them, Tz'ura'u mitisporet shel Ben Elasha. Go and see the haircut of my son-in-law Ben Elasha. Ben Elasha spent a lot of money. He was a wealthy man, and he was the son-in-law of Rebbe, and he spent a lot of money to get this type of haircut. Tanya Rebbe Omer, Rebbe said, Lo chinam pizer Ben Elasha et meotav. This Ben Elasha did not just spend his money freely, but rather to show, and the Gemara in Shabbat and Tetamud Bet seems to say, he also got this haircut. He learned it and he got it, this haircut of the Kohen Gadol, which we're calling this Tisporet Lul Yanit. Now just a couple of points before we finish off here. This was the son-in-law of Rebbe, and actually the Gemara Masechet Shabbat and Tetamud Bet tells us that this is a haircut that takes a long time and is very expensive. So the Gemara seems to interpret Kisom Yechasmu et Roshehem is referring to this unique haircut of the Kohen Gadol, which was that it was very short. Even though the simple pshat, as we brought out above in Yecheskel, seems to be referring to normal Kohanim, and we're saying that's the haircut they should get, it seems to be the way that many Rishonim here learn, this is referring to the Kohen Gadol and not other Kohanim. Meaning other Kohanim don't necessarily need to get this haircut, but rather that Kohen Gadol needs to get this haircut as we mentioned before. One final point is this Lul Yanit that we mentioned. There's a similar name mentioned in Mesechet Ta'anit on Yudchet Amud Bet. A tzaddik who was saved, Ayin Sham, take a look over there, that he was being persecuted. Look at the entire story, and there was a festival erected based on his salvation. Take a look over there. But the point is, there it's Lul Yanis, with a samach. Here it's with a taf, Lul Yanit. I wonder if it's the same person, unclear. And it's also referenced again, the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat and Tetamud Bet. But with this, we finish off the parak, Hadran Alach, Hadrach Alach, Kohen Gadol. What does it say, Hadrach Alach? Let's keep shouting that. Shouldn't it be Hadran Alach? Hadran Alach, Kohen Gadol, Hadran Alach, Kohen Gadol, Hadran Alach, Kohen Gadol. I don't know why on the bottom my Gemara says Hadrach Alan. But the point is, Hadrach Alach. The point is that Baruch Hashem, we finished the second parak. We're stopping the bottom of Chaf Bet and with Bet. We'll pick up tomorrow or next week actually, with the third parak. Be'ezrat Hashem, Mesechet Sanhedrin, Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. And tomorrow on Friday, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll do Chazara, what we did this past week. Actually 2 weeks, Be'ezrat Hashem. Everyone have a wonderful day.